Greetings and welcome to the first episode of our brand new podcast, which we've lovingly called Uncharted Territory, where we'll be exploring all the latest developments as the financial reset unfolds. This is a collaboration between myself and my co-host, Sam. Some of you may know Sam. He's featured on the podcast a couple of times before. We released a pilot episode a couple of weeks ago, and he's partnered with us in creating the Navigating Digital Assets course, which shares the good, the bad, and the ugly of crypto, blockchain, the digital world, handles a lot of the kind of skepticism, and gives you a really solid grounding on this emergent world and what to look for and how you can get involved. So we've actually got a very quick plug on that. That we're offering a special discount on that at the moment to celebrate the launch of this podcast. And you can go to weareelevate.org/digital assets. That's plug over. Sam, great to have you here on this brand new venture that we are embarking upon.
Well, great to be back, Dan. So enjoyed the pilot we did, and it's great to have a live audience for the first time. So we're already in Uncharted Territory, to go with the name of the podcast. And straight away, I always think when we're preparing something, I've got my notes, I've already thrown them away because I know we're just going to go on a journey, Dan, and that's what I like to do, as you know, and just see where it takes us. And I know you had some camera issues earlier with your son, but that's perfect because that's how it's going to be. We've got to be agile and pivot. So let's just go on the journey and see where we go this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And well, interestingly, our pilot was, we kind of called it an accidental podcast because in the preparation for this, the podcast, we've had lots of conversations, and every time we ended up speaking, we said, I wish we recorded that. That would have been great content. So actually midway through one of our conversations, we just did that. And then we ended up speaking for close to an hour, and that formed our pilot, which you can find on all the major channels. But we're here for our first official episode tonight, and I thought it'd be useful to go into a bit of the background about how you and I came to meet, Sam.
Absolutely, yep.
And then extend that further back to kind of get a grounding on your background as it pertains to this particular field, and I'll share a little bit of my story as well. But if I open up by stating that a very dear friend now and supporter of the work that we've done over the last couple of years of the Pandemic Podcast, Deborah, she introduced us, she invited us to one of your talks, Sam, down in Pulborough, and it was a really interesting experience because first of all, she sent me the digital flyer, and there's this guy, Sam, and I said, oh, Sam who? And I know you've had this before, and this is how we've adopted the moniker Sam X for you.
Absolutely, yeah, it's an important part of the story. Yeah, I'm glad you picked it up.
So this anonymous guy, Sam, because of course I straight away wanted to Google this guy. Who's Sam? What's he talking about? Because I'm going to travel 3.5 hours to go and see someone. I want to make sure he's someone that I want to speak to, hear us speak, and a subject matter that I really want to get my teeth into. But the flyer caught my attention, and of course I took Deborah's word, as a trusted, she sent so many great things to us in the past. It was a great introduction, and she hosted it at her wonderful space down in Pulborough called The Nest. And I was so delighted that I came, Sam, because I was enthralled, and it was a small space. There must be
it was really intimate, wasn't it? It was a great setting.
Yeah, 20 to 30 of us, and you gripped us all for 3 hours. You really did, and covered so much ground. And I was blown away. And I came to speak to you afterwards and said, look, I'd love to get you on the podcast. I'd love to bring you into our community. People need to hear what you've got to say, and that's exactly what we did. Yeah,
and here we are, and it's beautiful because in essence, I remember that because in fact Deborah's event was almost the first one. I'll probably circle back and tell a bit more of this story afterwards, but it was the first time I'd sort of got out of a network of a lot of people who knew me by word of mouth already in Sussex, down the southeast there. And so interestingly, it was the first time anybody who put a talk on with me had wanted more info about me. Because before, a few people, there was always enough people who knew who I was and thought, yeah, I like to, I know enough about Sam, let's have a dialogue. And it was twofold me, interestingly, that she kind of wanted, it was maybe you asked, Dan, or a few other people asked, who is this guy? And understandably so, I'm coming to talk about finance and crypto, and everyone in the age of the internet wants to Google, well, who is this guy? And it made me really think about it because I'd never had to come up with a name or give my details. And it wasn't fully about being anonymous. It was a large part of it was also that I'm not coming as an expert. Okay. I'm coming as a layperson to have a dialogue and not to be like the guy who arrives He knows about finance and crypto. He's going to tell you, what to do, how it works, what's going on. I was coming to facilitate a dialogue and bring my awareness and obviously bring a lot of knowledge and info from my years in the kind of alternative space of research, plus diving deep into financial research and crypto the last few years. So it was really interesting because you'd sort of say, people want to know more. And I did hold my ground and actually say, well, there isn't any more, just it's Sam. And if they really want to, if they're really curious, they'll come. And so that was really interesting because it was the first time I'd kind of spoken to an audience outside of Deborah, who had been to one of my talks, that there was a fresh audience, and I didn't have as many people in the crowd that maybe had been to other things, or I knew, from being at other talks where we're just in the audience together. So it was a really interesting, and then obviously met you, Dan, and then that's got spiraled from there. But it's been such an organic journey. And I want to tell this story because it really sums up how organic it has been. Because I actually only came back to the UK in 2020. So I've been living in mostly in France and the French Alps since 96. I took off on a gap year and didn't come back for 23 years. And partly that was my own kind of, although I wouldn't say I was awake, back in 96, I had a feeling of wanting to get out the matrix. I was a searcher, didn't really feel right in the mainstream. So I kind of followed my dreams and headed to the mountains and ended up staying there. Okay. And interestingly, before that, what's come full circle, the only kind of involvement with the kind of finance area in terms professionally was my first job was at the London Stock Exchange, funnily enough, in the settlements department. I did a stint at NatWest Stockbrokers and actually HSBC. I know, Dan, you had a pass at HSBC. I was in the global investor wing, but in an early, when I was sort of 18, 19, just to earn enough money to get out and go to the mountains. So I had a little taste of the markets at that age, but never had any interest in working them. But when I was in the ski industry, I did a lot of different things in the Alps, had a travel company. And when I came back here, with all that went on, the lockdowns, I kind of escaped a French lockdown, which was super intense. The whole kind of needed papers to leave the house, all that kind of business. So I just escaped that to come and see my family. Obviously had a lot of awareness from my own sort of background in the truth movement, being kind of, I don't know the term, but, awake to a lot of stuff since shortly after 9/11. So when this kicked off, I had a very good understanding of what was going on, and was kind of psychologically prepared for things to ramp up in 2020 onwards. So I really came home just to see my family. I'd been away for 20 years, wanted to sort of fill them in and bring them up to speed. And then from being back here, never thought I'd stay in the UK, ended up starting to meet amazing people all through the freedom networks locally. And obviously my old revenue streams had gone and I was sort of between, what am I going to do? I was obviously passionate. I wanted to help people and work, with the new communities coming up. And part of my journey into truth and economy was actually a health journey, like a lot of people. Okay. So I had kind of chronic health problems through my mid-20s. So that was one of my wake-up calls to the mainstream medicine not being too clued up, and even a lot of the alternative medicine not being really clued up. And I ended up healing myself in a very sovereign, empowered way. And it was a huge part of my own journey. And I was really passionate about that because I really healed myself with raw food and juicing, essentially. And I was really convinced that I was going to give talks, and that was my passion. I felt that for a few years, that actually that's what I want to do. That's my calling. I want to heal people. I want to help and heal. And obviously with all that's going on, there was a need for that. And also because it's very sovereign, I was about self-healing, showing that you didn't need much and you really did have the tools to do it yourself. And so, Dan, in that kind of 2020 period, I was, I had a sort of raw food and juicing book that I had in my mind, thought I'm going to write this, and I had this writer's block. I just couldn't, I'd had it in my mind years, thought this is going to be easy to get out. This is a really great subject. I'm passionate. It just wasn't coming out. And then I ended up sort of really digging deep personally into the financial reset and crypto myself. And quite kind of by accident, just chatting about finance and crypto over a curry with a good friend who was part of the sort of freedom networks locally. He said to me, come and have a chat. I want you to chat to my local group. And I felt reticent, I'll be honest. I felt, well, I'm happy to discuss with anybody who wants to. Actually, I don't see myself as a public speaker. And I kind of felt like, well, I'm on my way to speak about raw food and juicing and do that. But I did, and I was quite nervous, but it went well. And then I did a couple of more talks. And then it really just spiraled from there, because I knew that the financial reset was such an important topic and that it was potentially bigger than the COVID narrative and needed to be looked at. So the demand was just, calling me. suddenly people are saying, I think the talk, Deborah was that one of the early ones, from that very talk that I then met Deborah and came to see, met you, Dan, about 6 people in that talk said, you must come here, you must go there. So it all happened really organically. And actually, I could see that actually this is so needed and so worthwhile. There are loads of people doing amazing health talks. So it's just interesting how higher self sort of guided me. I had a kind of intuition that I wanted to help people and work in this community, but actually I had no idea it would end up being in finance and crypto. And then, I started Crypto Cafe to support people and help people. I also saw it's such a confusing topic. People are saying you're a really good communicator at getting things across. And I won't make the story dominate the whole podcast because it's long, but there was a really interesting point in it where I was kind of halfway through giving some financial research talks and helping people with crypto, still had this raw food juice in my mind. And I actually bumped into somebody I knew in the Alps who was in Brighton at a real healthy eating restaurant. I got chatting to them and they just begun their raw food and juicing journey and were really passionate about it. And it kind of fired that passion up in me. And she said to me, really in a lovely way, saying, well, you're talking about crypto and finance, not much love in that, is there? And I had this kind of guilty thing. I was like, no, I've fallen off. I had that feeling, Dan, of maybe I've fallen off my path and I've slipped into a topic that, isn't full of sort of helping and love. And it was a really great test because I went away and had to sit with it and had a bit of a battle going on, and she coming from a really great place, which was like she, was getting into her raw food and juicing journey, was seeing the power and almost saying to me, well, I know people in crypto and finance, it's not, it's about making money. It's a bit, it's not much love and, groundedness in it. But in a way, in hindsight, it was the perfect on the hero's journey, the test. Okay. The test to actually look and almost the one that can pull you back away. You started down a path, you're going there, and then something pops up and makes you think, hang on, but it actually tested my resilience to sit with that, think about it. And then actually it brought me to a really powerful realization that, God, she's right, but actually she's right in a way. But what she's saying actually is, and what I realize is this topic needs the love and nurture that isn't in it. Okay. There's plenty of love and nurture in all the healers and the people around there. But here's a topic that I'm obviously being called to speak to. And I'm responding to what the need is. I wasn't chasing this or forcing it. People are asking me to come. But it just, and it felt like a real profound moment of this topic needs love and nurture more than any. That's what it's lacking. And to be able to, and now it feels totally right, Dan. And that's how I've ended up here tonight. And that's how we're all here and be on the journey. And it's been incredible. But I just want to tell that because I think it's also, whenever we start discussions about finance or crypto or anything, I want to bring that vibe, which is we're talking about, the energy around it, transforming the energy around this topic, which can be so negative, can be so confusing, can be so scary. And if we can shift that energy collectively first and help each other, that changes everything. Okay. So it's a long story, but I think it's an important kind of intro to how I end up here and what energy I want to bring to this topic. And hopefully that's what people are responding to brilliantly.
Yeah, really, really powerful story. And actually there's a few layers that I'd like to extract within this because I think it's important. Firstly, the hero's journey part, the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey on the path. And it links to kind of the second layer that I want to talk to you about, because that reference point of it being a non-loving space, again, is multifaceted, because you've got the issue where, like any market, when it comes to finances, there's always the kind of get rich quick schemes. Yep. And the marketing and the messaging is always driven by that kind of almost like a greed-centered message. And I could understand then why someone would say, where's the love? Now, what's important for your hero's journey, we're actually being with that moment, particularly what I've observed as well over the last 10 years of working with entrepreneurs, particularly, is this concept of kind of shiny object syndrome, where the business leaders I've worked with, the early stage, they start on a path, but then the next thing comes along and it excites them and they deviate from the path, but then they do it again and they end up zigzagging, zigzag, never really committing, never really following a path. But it requires that commitment. Mastery requires commitment in any endeavor. So the fact that you took stock, you held the space for it, and you followed that internal navigation and kept on the path when so many would have been distracted by something else or deviated from the path, I think is so powerful. And I think it's so powerful in the context of this conversation around finance, because again, as people start to explore things like crypto, and you shared a brilliant meme with me today, and you said this is the opposite of what we want to be. And it's all of these videos you see on YouTube of like shock, that open mouth syndrome, they call it. Like, what's happening, what's happening in the market. It's all this hysteria, and it's all like hype, and jump on this, get rich. It's all this energy, which it creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Well, it's noisy, Dan. It's super noisy, at every level. Noisy. Yeah, it is. So distortion, and you can get very addicted, whatever, but it hasn't got that, which we always, and our conversation always rolling back to, not the binaries, kind of the excitement or the fear, but actually where's the middle way? Yes. Where's the balance? And so bringing balance to this topic, bringing balance to crypto in itself is so much needed, and it does exist. And I think that's the thing, and it does exist in finance, does exist in markets. It's like, but that's not what people are being delivered, and obviously that's also a lot of how they control people, which is keep them on a roller coaster, and we always talk about the binaries of the extremes either side, and how the pendulum swinging from excitement, fear, greed, or fear, can we bring it to a central place and get grounded, and from there we can take really good action.
Yeah, indeed. And that's kind of the third layer really in the context, because we are living in truly uncertain times. And the reason we've called this podcast the Uncharted
Territory.
Thank you. Long day.
It's new. It's new.
It's new. Yeah.
Maybe it's not catchy enough.
We'll road test it tonight. But it is that idea that we're navigating the emergent property of this, and there will be elements that we know due to the kind of centralized top-down impositions. There are things that are of course set in motion, and we can to some degree predict and anticipate what's coming. But at the same time, some of the implications and consequences are unknown, and there's lots of things that we don't know. So as a result, where there is uncertainty, there is a chance, or a heightened chance, of fear. And as you said, fear is used to polarize, it's used to divide, it's used to distract. And as a result, it leaves us in a disempowered state. So what I love most about what you've shared, and actually it is what really drew me to your style at the first talk, was your way of communicating in such a way. And you've used that term binary again. I know binaries, we talked about it in the pilot as well. It's looking at the two edges of the bell curve, if you will, the two opposite ends of the spectrum, and and holding the space for all of it, but trying to bring it to a point of understanding where it is that grounded experience of reality. Because, and I describe you to others as kind of like the rock in the river, which it brings certainty, but without overconfidence or arrogance. It just brings a calm energy to it, which I personally resonate to, because again, I have a history in finance. I did spend nearly 8 years working for HSBC, largely in the kind of retail branch baking. No, baking's not my forte. Branch
cooking.
Banking.
Well, they do a lot of cooking of books in there, so there's sure some sort of baking going on.
Cooking of books.
Yeah.
And commercial banking, which is what ultimately led me to leave my financial career behind, because I had the privilege of working with everything from solo founder startups all the way up through to large corporations. But I really loved working with the people who were just getting started in business, the passion they had, the hunger. And during the last recession, the last moment like this, where there was the kind of early warning signs of what was to come, 2008, 2009, that was when I first came face to face with the machine, even though I was in the machine. Just to be clear, I was nowhere near the top of the ivory tower. I didn't get to pull any levers, but I did get to see the levers being pulled. And there was an exact moment during the course of the recession at that point, where the banking crisis, where I could see, and I went to my boss and I said, this is peculiar. It feels like if the banks were to internally rectify this situation, there would be no spillover effect. We could actually avoid a crisis altogether. And he agreed. But despite that, this crisis unfolded, and I became deeply suspicious, because I thought this does not make sense. And as it unfolded and the recession hit and the banking crisis unfolded, it wasn't as simple as just greedy fat cats making a buck. That was certainly a big driver that was happening, but
it's an oversimplified kind of narrative that people digest. But absolutely, what an important eye opener for you, Dan.
Yeah, and that was the beginning of an awakening for me. That was one of many awakenings during that time, 10 years over 10 years ago now, 15 years ago. But similarly, I bring that experience and background to these conversations, and a more traditional understanding of finance, but also now an increasingly awakened mind, which is why I'm excited by this conversation that we're bringing, because we're able to bring our kind of diverse backgrounds together and hopefully hold that grounded space for people to explore this, because that third layer of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I saw it the first time around the last recession, and it's happening now, but we've got a whole new layer of problems this time around.
That was the pre-echo warm-up, really, for the event, which is what we're in now.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our community who are here tonight are probably here because they share that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and are kind of looking, how do we protect our assets? How do we safeguard our finances? But not just that, how do we actually decipher what our options are moving forward, whether it's crypto or gold or property or other assets, so people are looking for guidance. So, this to me is a really exciting exploration, that term navigating. We're navigating this together. So would you share a little bit about, your ethos around this, which you've brought to this?
Yeah, well, I think just what you said there about options, Dan, we do have so many options. And why, almost going back to that original thing of, I'm never coming saying, I am the expert, do this, do that. I mean, I wouldn't do that anyway, but the real message is, let's shine a light on the options. I might have done a lot more legwork. I have done a lot of, not necessarily more than everybody, but I'm immersed in this. So for me, it's shining light on options that a lot of people don't know what options exist even. But if you combine that, I think the powerful combination, Dan, is the energy plus the practicalities. Okay, often again, we see people addressing energy, and that's amazingly important, and people addressing, kind of practicalities. But the real sweet spot is bringing those two together, and that's really what is where the magic is. There's always, combining those forces rather than being all in energy, sort of, shifted too much into just energetically or just into the sort of mundane practical. Bring them together, which is, if we shift the energy around this topic, that we are getting out of fear, getting into motion, because the fear is at its core is paralyzing. That's the biggest block. It's not the practicalities, it's the paralysis and being stuck from taking decisions. If we can get moving and get each other moving, and that's what helps. And that's, Dan, that's why you said that we record those conversations, is I keep moving because I need those conversations. I need those dialogues for myself. So I thrive off those dialogues because I learn, we all learn off each other, and we learn off, some people have more awareness of certain areas, we learn off them, but the richness and the keeping moving is the dialogue. So absolutely, but not negating the real practicality, because we do live, I think I'm really in tune with I like to be with the astrology, what's going on, the energies, but equally really grounded in taking, sometimes really boring, mundane action. It's both and, not either or. Okay, we always cover the binaries. It's both. So, but if we can bring this both into balance, we can do great things. And part of what I want to say about getting out the fear is that what people can sometimes slip into, when you understand how many nefarious agendas there are and the kind of control structure and where they want to go, is it some people can fall into the trap of, a financial reset is all them. They are doing a financial reset. Okay. When you understand that a lot of these things are cycles playing out, and that a reset needs to happen. Okay. Financial reset needs to happen. They wanted to go in a certain way, but it needs to be reset anyway. So I think sometimes people get stuck in fear and almost go, I want to resist any change, I want to stay where we are. But we're in a broken system already that isn't healthy and isn't working for most people, we're honest. So rather than being sort of stuck and saying, I want to stay with my current slave system, debt-based, fiat currency backed by nothing slave system, because I'm scared of what's coming. Yes, I understand we'd be vigilant about their plans, but equally, it's an amazing opportunity for us to start learning and pivoting and creating better things ourselves. Because it's not that the elites, or whatever word you want to use, the mischief gang, somebody I know calls them, I quite like that term. It's not that they control the cycles, they just understand the cycles, and they understand when they're kicking in. but we all are in the cycles, and we can all leverage, and we can all ride the waves. We can all pivot. So it's interesting because I'm kind of interested in astrology on the macro level. And sometimes I remember recently looking, and I won't get into details of it because I'll probably get it wrong and forget, and astrology will pick me up and say, no, it's not Pluto. But, something about Pluto shifting for the first time into Aquarius for a long period, and that this was a really good time to create new structures. Okay. And of course, that's what they're doing.
Yes.
But that's not that they don't have exclusivity on that energy.
No,
okay. Right. So that's really important to remember. The energy is the energy. And absolutely, they're aware of it and they're using it to create new structures. But rather than being enthralled and kind of like, understand it like kind of, oh my God, they're creating that. What can we really do? We discussed it on the last pilot. The tricksters aren't going to stop playing their tricks trying, but we can get busy creating ourselves and doing stuff. And a lot of what they rely on is us remaining in fear, remaining in thrall of their plans, whether we're for them or against them or angry about them. And because it expends all energy and takes our energy away from taking tangible steps, at a personal, local, family, community level that they can't control. They want to control more by fear, by narratives. So I think taking back our power and owning that we can do things, but it does take effort and it does take proaction. But that is the sovereign way. But by getting moving, I think what's really interesting for me, because I'm working in space now a lot. So that gives me the discipline to stay into a lot of the info constantly, is that the more you sit with it, the more stay with it, the more you see opportunities you didn't even know existed.
Yes.
Now, they're not going to come and knock on your door if you're not taking a step towards them yourself. I think that's really important that, there are opportunities everywhere. And it's almost like when the old system is going down, that's a kind of opening up. Yes, they want to close down the gates and really try and corral people, but actually there's a window of opportunity here, and maybe some of you out there, have been really financially savvy and clued up, and maybe it's just about pivoting now into maybe different asset classes or looking at, or maybe like many of us, because we weren't educated about money, and always being confused. This is a great opportunity to finally, get clear, and obviously with the help of, support and listen to people you really want to, that you resonate with, is get clear and get empowered about topics that have always stressed you. And I always give my, mum as an example, because she's, in her 70s, always been highly stressed by money, left it to my dad, but he did pass away, last year, sadly. But, that's forced her to look at it. And obviously, she hangs out with me quite a lot and, has come to lots of my talks and listens to me endlessly. I've seen the shift in her, where she's actually finding it interesting and, fascinating, really, and getting empowered, because it's like so much of the fear is not understanding where you are, where we are, what money is today, or, what the markets are. And I want to reassure people, hopefully from my talks, because it's not as complex as they want you to think it is. And that's all does by design, so that you feel stressed. And, it's that classic, you need experts. You need our experts to do everything, and we outsource to us, and we'll slowly rob you. Okay. But if we can get empowered and understand, that is the beginning of transforming our relationship to money going forward. So I think it's really valuable work, regardless of where you're at, or regardless of what your situation is, because it is the universal subject that affects us all. And I always like somebody told me this great line I'd like to repeat, which is, a lot of people are scared by the markets. Okay, like, the volatility of markets. But when you realize we're all in the market, you can't not be in the market. You're in it with your wages, if you're transacting, you're in it. So, once you can relax into that, there's no escaping it. But if you can go towards it, then you can, there are things you can do. There are always options then. So always give a longer answer than a snippet, but I hope that's kind of encapsulate the ethos of where we're at.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for both of us.
in
our communication.
Which is why we're having a weekly podcast coming up.
Yes, yeah.
Because we're not, and it is a bottomless topic. Once you get the dialogue going, that's what's so exciting, is that you go on a journey, and it's not even that's why I'm so excited about when I give talks live, and it's great to do them on Zoom now, but I do love them live because we get a dialogue going. And in a sense, the biggest thing is people, not having that dialogue with each other, and once you've got a dialogue going between yourselves, then that just shifts the energy. It doesn't even mean somebody's got the binary, do this, do that, but it's got you moving. And once you're moving, it's much easier to keep moving. It's very hard when you're at a standing start to get any momentum. And the more you're moving, as you said, Dan, this is going to be a constantly evolving space, and no one knows how it's going to play out. But you don't need to. But if you're moving, you can then pivot and kind of, and ride the waves and look at them. And I don't want to be cheesy, but I do mean get creative with this as much as we can. Let's move it from a fear-based, mitigating everything into we can do some mitigation, but we also do some real creation as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I did a webinar just before Christmas called How to Thrive During Uncertain Times. And if you're a member for the Elevate community, you can see the replay of that inside the community. We may have put it on the YouTube channel now as well. But within that, I talked about the psychology and the kind of neuroscience around how we become disempowered and get into that stuck state in the presence of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And one of the things that we clearly learned during the course of the COVID chapter was that fear is the most contagious virus.
Yeah,
that was visceral during the course of the last 3 years, and it still is. The reality is, within the communities that you and I operate, there is still a lot of fear. And we spoke about this the other day. You can be in fear of the virus, or you can be in fear of the kind of the reset itself and the totalitarianism, the tyranny that's unfolding. And it's okay to kind of witness the fear. Fear is a survival mechanism, and to be with it, and to kind of, but I like the term dance with the fear, get playful with it, because if you fall into the trap of going into that uncertainty, you'll find yourself in that stuck state. But you'll also,
and you maybe even I want to shift the word down, almost fear to vigilance.
Yes,
you can be alert and vigilant and aware without being in fear. More like that. That kind of animal state, which is at peace, but equally, we do live in a place with threats and predators, at some level, energetic wise, and therefore, we're vigilant, but we're not, being caught in fight or flight is where they want us, because that lowers our immune system and stops us taking any creative action. And we are creative people, particularly in these communities.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's important. It's difficult. I grew up on the coast, on the Devonshire coast, down in Torbay, and we've just moved to Bournemouth. But there was this all along the Brixham Harbour where my grandparents used to live. There would be people just dangling these kind of crab catching things into the. I should know all the terms, having grown up in these areas. But people are just trying to catch crabs. And there's this interesting metaphor when you catch, and this is real. When you catch crabs and you put them in a bucket. If you watch their behavior, if one crab tries to escape to its freedom, they're climbing out. This is genuine. The other crabs in the bucket will pull them back down to stop them from getting their freedom. And that's an important metaphor, because even within the communities that we operate in, that fear can take over the group or the community very, very quickly. And you see people taking powerful action. They're stepping forward, but then someone will try and pull them back and say, "Oh, that's a scam," or "That's a controlled opposition." And all of a sudden, by virtue of what someone else has said, they've effectively pulled them back into the fear zone and taken away that person's sovereignty and their ability to be, fully responsible for their own decisions.
Massively, Dan. You must have seen it on your own personal, journey. I've seen it, and we're really well-meaning people, especially when you're chasing your dreams. It's almost like, you get very well-meaning people who do care about you, but unfortunately, they're trying to pull you back in.
Sam, just to stop you, there's a message in the chat. It sounds like the sound has gone funny. I thought it might have just been my device, but I think there's a sound disturbance. It sounds like you might want to just check.
How's that?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
got it. Is that better? Apologies.
Yeah, rewind.
Is it still all right?
Yeah, sorry. This is the beauty of doing a live one, that we're not broadcasting we can cut this little bit out and put it back.
It was a sound. It wasn't just gone on a funny tangent. Yeah,
no, that's the sound. Yeah, so rewind.
Yeah, I think that thing of when you're, even when you're making breakthroughs or you're following your dreams or on your path, you can have really well-intentioned people want to pull you back in, and not even consciously, because often there's a comfort of all being in the same spot together. When you're often breaking out and doing different things, people sometimes want to say, we feel more comfortable if we're all, together and not doing that. So, I think the beauty in having ongoing dialogues, because I've seen it so much now, what's excited me is seeing people shift around this topic and move from that fear into that creating that excitement. And I think I'm sure hundreds of people on this podcast who are watching live or listening later on.
The sound gremlins have got you again, Sam, I'm afraid.
How's that?
Yeah, back again. Yeah. And we can't blame the gremlins this time because Zoom, believe it or not, is actually end-to-end encrypted. So
okay. Am I still okay?
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah. During the course of the COVID chapter of the pandemic podcast, we literally we saw ourselves getting live censored on YouTube, Facebook. We'd see, at one point we had something like 5,000 people watching live, and it just went down to like 50. We're like, were we that uninteresting that that many people dropped off? So this is an important subject, Sam, and over the course of this week, we're going to be recording these conversations every single week on the Uncharted Territory podcast and exploring themes around the financial reset, crypto. But I'd like to touch on both of those subjects very briefly, because in the context of what we were just discussing around what other people's views are around these things, different people's beliefs, and how those beliefs and understandings can influence ourselves, there's a lot of noise around crypto. And I know this is a big conversation. I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot over the course of the weeks ahead. But I find it interesting, if I look at the history of crypto, and I actually discovered Bitcoin in 2011, when just before, like really in its infancy, just before I'd left, maybe 2012, just before I left HSBC, started my own path.
Discovered but didn't buy, Dan.
Exactly. That's that was the serious fatal flaw. And again, it's perception, because, okay, it probably was more complicated to acquire a Bitcoin back then. Yeah. But really, in the scheme of things, and I look back now, and if I bought just one Bitcoin, it would have been, worth 15, I don't know what it's worth in today's money, but just even a fraction. I think I looked at £100 worth. I bought £100 worth. It would be worth something like 15 grand today.
I'm going to bust your myth there, Dan, because if you had bought, you wouldn't have rode it that long.
No, I'd have bottled it. Yeah.
What if some good stories, but unless you've fallen into a coma and woken up, because that no one knew the future. It's easy in hindsight. If I put it there, say you 100 quid then, I turned into a grand.
Sam, your sound is not loving life. I don't know what it is. You might have to go retro to your old device.
I'm going to my old device. Is that better?
Yeah, it's slightly. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, we're good.
I've had to ditch the new microphone. I'm sorry.
If it's not the mic, it may be the connection, but we're good. So yeah, I if I'd bought my Bitcoin, I would have probably bottled it. But you were saying,
well, every time there's been a bear market, i.e., you get huge rise of it, people think that's the end. Okay, and you wouldn't know the future, so you could have thought that's it maxed out. So you might have done 10x your money and thought, well, this is as good as you're going to get. So you would have sold. So it's very rare for people to have ridden it all the way from, its beginnings at 0.8% to its peak at $69,000. You either were an insider with prescience, or you had fell into a coma and woke up. And so yeah, I want to ease your pain of what ifs.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. But what I did there was like a New Year's resolution almost every year. I said, this is the year I'm gonna do it. I procrastinated massively, and I made my first investments last year. With the intention actually of what you've just stated, I've got a long-term view. The investments I've made, I want to hold. I want to go long on those. So I'm not looking. In fact, I've only looked at their performance about 2 or 3 times since I purchased them about a year ago, because I'm just looking, as long as they haven't completely been eradicated off the map, I had that with First Direct, when I was working for HSBC, when the financial crisis, I thought they're not going to allow a bank to collapse. I'm going to get these now. Was it at the bottom? Mistake. Off the chart they went. But that's a different story. But what was interesting tracking its course during that time is largely, freedom has always been one of my highest values. I'm drawn to freedom communities, always have been, always fiercely independent. So, when I tracked its early course, it was really, to me, it was very much a disruptive technology. To me, I saw it as almost this anarchic freedom seeking. And there is this huge, parallel freedom communities. When our community talk about the kind of freedom movement, they're thinking in terms of what's happened in the last couple of years with COVID and now the financial reset and the Great Reset and everything that's going around it. But there's been this long-standing financial freedom space, and it's crypto, I feel, has got its history in that spot. But interestingly, now there's a great skepticism amongst kind of today's freedom movement around crypto. And I can understand why, with the emergence of central bank digital currencies and the kind of authoritarian nature of the kind of governance that we're seeing right now. So I understand not only the skepticism, but the fear. But what would you say to people just, who are looking at this with a skeptical eye, in terms of...
Well, you're spot on, Dan, and it does tie nicely into your story because, big part of your waking up was that 2008, and Bitcoin was a response to that, in essence, which is, cutting out the parasite banks and looking at a peer-to-peer system, for the people. So decentralized. So, it makes perfect sense that you would have come across it in that sense. And that is absolutely the foundation of it. And I think what's happened is that people newer to crypto are now lumping it in with this kind of idea that anything digital is bad, because we are absolutely heading towards, that's their plans towards, digital versus things used for more surveillance, more control, but that's not the full story. And I think I always talk about, I like to talk about the holistic view, that there is the good, bad, and the ugly in it. There's everything, the full spectrum, as there are in the cycles. We talk about shifting from, age of Pisces to age of Aquarius. Well, it's not that Pisces is good or Pisces is bad, Aquarius is good. They have the full light, dark spectrum in them, in the full gamut at either end. So, and therefore crypto has that fully in it as well. Absolute freedom, ethos, decentralization at its core, and the tech can be used for surveillance and control. So it's really important to understand the full spectrum. And that's why I say education is your first step to then, before you pass judgment on something, and understand what it is before you, either say I'm fully in or I'm fully out, or so then you can decide how you want to interact with it, or if you want to do it all. There's no right answer, but the absolute foundation is to understand it. And my issue is has always been people sort of throwing accusations from a place of not understanding, and that's just not helpful on an education point of view, because it's simply, a lot of it's just simply not true, and we've talked about it before, but there are people absolutely criticizing crypto, using it to their benefit in a freedom, decentralized way, quite rightly, like Odyssey, these decentralized streaming platforms are crypto blockchain technology. And the reason they're uncensored is because they are decentralized blockchain, as opposed to YouTube, which is, the earlier iteration of the internet, which is what we call Web 2.0. So therefore, there is a genuine use case which we can all, is tangible, we can all understand. But there are lots of people using that whilst, and even, the irony being on that platform, delivering the message that everything to do with crypto is evil.
Yes.
There's that great irony. Again, it's not to tell me, but it's just a great example of, people not really understanding the full picture and having a viewpoint and then, waxing lyrical about it without knowing. And it's always, which is why our podcast is going to talk about binaries, it's always more nuanced than that, and actually more interesting, because there's so much to dive into. And you're absolutely right, Dan, this whole shift to what people are dubbing Web 3, okay, yes, which is the shift from Web 2.0. And interestingly, people have seen my other talks and the cycles. It's also a cycle, because 28-year cycle is very important in our world, because Saturn, I don't know if people are aware in their life cycle, Saturn return is usually very pivotal every 28 years. So often you get 3 parts of your life. If you ask somebody who's not into astrology, did you have a big shift around age 27, 28? Often they'll have really momentous. Same again at the next 28-year cycle. So interestingly, the internet as we know it, the kind of modern internet, really began probably around 94, when it really kind of coming through. And actually we're 28 years on to its next iteration. So it is moving from Web 2.0 into Web 3.0. So that is a shift in itself naturally. And you have to write down, and there are people who see that as a utopian shift, and it could be left to its own devices. But we know that things aren't left to their own devices to happen organically, because you've got two factors. You've got absolutely clearly nefarious agenda controls mixed with the challenges of human behavior, of greed and of control. So, a large aspect, most problem aspect is, in my opinion, the agendas, but also people's greed and their own fear and acting not from a balanced place. is also affected, because it's the same revolution as the internet, really. People saw that as a panacea for, democratization, whatever. The next level of the internet, Web 3.0, is really about, at its essence, us controlling our own data, us, owning our own, owning things personally, and us deciding how much privacy we give up or don't, and if we do, on our terms. So Web3 is an absolutely incredible development, but I'm just very realistic that, the powers that be don't want it to evolve in that way, and are busy, trying to, take hold of this shift and corral it and control it as much as they can, as they've done with the internet.
Yes.
So it's not that they created all the shifts or that they run all the shifts. The shifts happen, they get things done, but they want to try and corral people into viewing it a certain way, using it a certain way, rather than, letting it organically solve a lot of issues it could well do. So you're absolutely right, Dan. The real core ethos at the start of it is about freedom and decentralization, not about, whereas the irony being that, of course, as always, they're doing the absolute antithesis, which is taking that movement and using the tech to create an absolutely most centralized form of digital surveillance control. So there are the two spectrums. There's the yin and yang, the dark and light, all within the same tech. The tech itself is neutral.
Absolutely. So there's again a couple of strands here that we'll extract very briefly, and then we'll kind of move into the final stages before we close out for Q&A. But at the core of it is that opportunity to take greater control as an individual. The personal responsibility that comes with that. But here is where it gets tricky, and it wraps around everything we've talked about so far. The opportunity is there. The opportunity for us to have greater sovereignty and control over our data, our privacy, our future. The idea of you'll own nothing and be happy, that's touted with the Great Reset. The opposite could be true with the emergent properties of Web3, blockchain, etc. We have access to a once in a lifetime, maybe twice in a lifetime opportunity with what's emerging, if we know how to navigate it. But the difficulty, Sam, the worry I have is how do we go beyond awakening? Because awakening to its potential is one thing.
Yeah.
But then moving beyond the awakening itself into becoming empowered and then taking action, because we know that those with the agenda and the power and the control already, they're steamrolling. They're in it. They're in the game. They're moving forward. But like you say, they're structuring it. They're centralizing it. They're trying to own it, manage it. The Open AI was bought basically by Microsoft and put as most closed AI you could ever have. So all this is
what we've discussed in some of the previous chats. They allow creative people to create solutions. They go in and destroy, make them bankrupt and buy them up to control them. So they're very good at that system. They're not very creative. They're the dark destroyers, but they lure creative people to create solutions. We'll come in, and take it off your hands. That's what's going on in decentralized finance now.
Absolutely.
Finance for the people and us having control, and the individual being able to be, the unbanked being able to be banked, but on their terms in a permissionless fashion. So absolutely, that's what I'm watching play out, which I knew would play out, and I'm just watching it with curiosity at the moment.
Yes, but again, that to me is it leads to a state of apathy, and it creates this is how the cycle perpetuates. It's always the small percentage, the 1%, if you will, that will capitalize on these, even though the opportunities that, we'll argue that the 1% have already got the assets to make these things move. That's a fair argument, but the opportunity is certainly there, and it's figuring out how to access those opportunities to leverage them for your own good. And I think in order for, and one of my dear friends who'll probably come on the show with us is of that utopian view that this offers that kind of decentralized potential. And I agree with the potential is there, but I'm skeptical because of the systems, the structures, the human psychology. But nothing is certain. We have the future is yet to be written, and we have the opportunity, if we can galvanize enough people to into this awakened state, to say, actually, I'm going to play my part, become an active participant in shaping Web3, shaping the future, and actually ousting, the clutches.
You just nailed it. You recapped it, Dan. Which is really, they rely on people being passive. If you're passive, their wave will take you and slam you on the beach, and it will. But if you are active, you can paddle out and surf it. But it's exactly that shift, is that you have to go towards it and learn and do the hard work, and that's what there would be, to stop it being completely niche, like areas of the internet where the kind of early cyberpunks did stay free and used it in their way, but it becomes very niche. That's the concern, that they'll corral most people into their version of blockchain, whatever, and that absolutely it will exist in a decentralized way, but that the fear would be, I don't use the word fear, but the potential would be, if people don't get educated, learn, that there'd only be the real techie people who understand that. And I think that's where, like, just getting educated to use these tools and get behind them and again, understand it, understand what it is, and that's why I said there's some great books to read, really balanced ones, and I'll have to show people that will give you an understanding of what this whole blockchain use cases are, and it's extraordinary when you understand it, for good, always with that caveat, for good, bad, and ugly purposes. But it's really not just digital currencies, as we discussed. It really is the next iteration of the internet, and it is a huge shift. And I think that's my kind of ethos as well, that this shift is coming. And rather than try and resisting is, I equate to saying I'm going to try and hold back the internet in 2000. So, whether you like tech or not, I always say I'm not a real techie, geeky guy. I'm coming at this from hopefully why I can, communicate it to people, because I'm not coming from that kind of background. I'm coming from a real holistic view of it. Is if you can understand it, then you can really get a clearer picture of what's happening, and then that helps you navigate, where you're going to go, or where it fits drive or not, and just having that position, rather than being a passive victim of what they create, because they do rely a lot on, like I said, people being in inaction and being fear, and they can't control all that, but they want to just corral you through fear and through narratives. So you're absolutely right, Dan. The opportunities are all there, and this is a shift. So let's get busy and get creative, and I suppose it's an opportunity to do better things than we did before anyway, at all levels.
Yes, no, I agree, absolutely. I think education is the key to becoming empowered, to moving beyond that state of awareness and awakening. Education is the first step to empowerment, in my view. It's the knowledge, but the knowledge transforms into wisdom only through action itself. Yeah. And of course, the way they'll use the same kind of argument to lock stuff down and regulate it is, well, for your own safety. It's too wild west. So I want to give this example. So, people sometimes say, well, crypto's got no value to it, but really what crypto is code. So saying it's got no value, it's code and networks. Saying that's got no value is like saying, Uber and Airbnb have no value. Okay, these are multi-billion-dollar companies because they're networks and built on code, programming. But what's so interesting, if blockchain was left its own devices, you could now create a blockchain version, decentralized version of Uber and Airbnb. Because what Airbnb have done is create a solution, but it's centralized in that all the data and all the payments have to go through Airbnb. So it is about connecting people, viewing us all as peer-to-peer people, and Uber as well, i.e. you've got space in your car, there's a passenger. So we're having that amazing connection of services, good services between peers, but it's still all funneling through a centralized system. They're getting the data, they're taking huge fees, they're in control. So actually, as we've known, Uber and these things haven't necessarily been good for people. But with blockchain tech, you can actually create that same network, but make it totally peer-to-peer. So it's really the transformation that's possible. But imagine, again, the way that they try and deal with that is say, well, we can't let people, it's too dangerous to do that. They need, so regulation is always their way to say, as we know, for your own safety is the line, isn't it? Yeah, someone said to me, maybe you, Sam, I can't remember who said it now, but it's a great quote, that regulation is the path to legalizing corruption. It's just I think such a powerful sentiment. Look, we've been speaking for nearly an hour now, and this latter part, I think illustrates the depth of the types of conversation that's possible here. There are so many angles to navigate, and that's certainly our intention here on this podcast, brand new podcast, Uncharted Territory. And we've called it that because, the future is unknown. We are at a critical juncture. What's coming next could change everything, negatively or positively. We'll likely see volatility in the markets. There is change occurring at every level. We can make some predictions and assessments about what could unfold with the financial reset. People are asking, is it here yet? When's it going to happen? Almost like expecting kind of a Black Friday type event where it's just like the collapse, or, for the media to start talking about institutions collapsing like in the banking crisis. But I think this is something bigger and more organic. It could lead to all manner of things, the end of fiat currency. It could lead to all kinds of surveillance structures and so on. We don't know, although...
I want to jump in, Dan. I'm glad you said that, because I do get, people almost are looking for a binary day when it's happening.
Yes.
And then it's over. Because almost that result of, oh God, it's over. How did I do? Did I make it through? And interestingly, people who've been in my other talks know that I talked a lot about the Shemitah cycles, and that's why things began ramping up in 2022. But then once that info gets sort of bigger awareness, then they leverage that and start pushing people to, oh, it's going to happen end of September. I don't know if people here remember, there's a lot to, as soon as somebody's pointing at a date, that's not it. Okay. If thousands of sort of, commentators on YouTube are all saying it's all going to go down tomorrow, that's not it. And equally, I'm going to answer the question of when's the financial reset. It's already happened, it's happening, and it's going to continue happening. All three. So in a sense, the 1929 level of crash, if you had a traditional portfolio, which, kind of old school financial advisors would give people, would be 6% equities, 40% bonds, you've already had your 929 crash. It's done. But crashes look different because we're in a different time. And in 1929, they didn't have this endless, digital printing of fresh money. They're basically, since 2008 now, they're just creating new ways of massaging the game, of plugging holes, whatever, delaying the inevitable. So I think it's important to go, this is ongoing. It's not going to be overnight, so almost getting out of fear, and I don't mean settle into it as in, settle in and watch the show, but settle into this being a process. And if we're moving and in emotion ourselves, then yeah, we're going to react. And exactly that, we're vigilant, and we may take action, and we're looking at positioning ourselves in the most strong, way possible that gives you that peace of mind that you're not overexposed to third-party risk, to sitting too much in currency that's worth nothing. So there are always practicalities, but it's not going to be a overnight, win, lose, this happened, that's happened. It's going to be ongoing. And so being able to pivot and just spend energy and get creative is what's going to transform the journey. And, that's what I'm doing. That's what, I want to do. And that's why we have regular chats. And I think that's how we're going to navigate it together. And people are often looking for kind of, the experts, but the experts today are all the experts of yesterday. Okay, there aren't really any experts because we're moving into uncharted territory. So what, I try and seek out, and with each other, is, thinking outside the box, trailblazers, and no one can tell you how it's going to happen. So we do need to settle into the uncertainty and embrace that, and look, and like I said, not be totally in fear, just it's uncertain, but that's okay, because life's always been uncertain.
Yes. Yeah. And I would agree with that, there's some of the conventional financial advice is way off the mark at the moment. It's also unlikely to be accurate or viable in the current environment.
Well, we've never had the shift that's coming. So I always give an example, like 1929, a lot of people, maybe the early truthers of the time who understood, like we had a bit of prescience about what was going on, they fled fiat currency knowing that it was going to hyperinflation, and they got into gold and silver, which is still great today. But equally, there wasn't much else to flee to. They got into commodities and precious metals. But we live in an age where there are all sorts of different asset classes where the money might flow. So there are different, crashes, like history doesn't repeat, it rhymes, but it's always different because we're in a different age.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is why it's absolutely crucial that people kind of sift through the noise and the fear and the misinformation and the outright propaganda to start to piece together the kind of bigger picture, but also the more micro and meso opportunity, the ground level opportunities. The reality is that people, I saw it firsthand in 2008, 2009, people lose out financially in these times of profound change because they bury their heads in the sand and fail to see, fail to take stock of what's coming, or fail to take action in the midst of the storm. You know, I've got so many stories I could tell during the time, because I was still in banking during that time. I saw so many horror stories. And it was large, you know, the problem was largely a function of the fact that, you know, people weren't willing to kind of open their eyes to what was happening and course correct to navigate and take appropriate action. You know, so many businesses that I saw go under could have actually avoided it if they had taken different actions, which is part of the reason why I left my career behind, because whilst I was working in corporate, I couldn't give any advice.
Because if we accept, if we almost for a minute park all agendas, I know that's quite difficult because we avoid so many, but let's for a moment, let's park them all. We understand we're in shifting, changing times anyway. Therefore, being adaptable and pivot is key, even without the agendas on top. So I think you're actually right, Dan. People who've been able to pivot and be adaptable have always been able to do well. So, you know, and understand, and even at that core level for me, basic financial education, which is not super boring, complicated, but it just takes out that confusion. I just want to say that, you know, when the critical thing happened in 1971, you know, which was about that same thing, 20 years after the Bretton Woods Agreement. So again, that cycle, that was around 43, 44, 28 years later, we come off the gold standard. Okay, but a lot of people didn't even understand what had happened. The people who understood what had happened adapted and realized this is the beginning of us having money, fake money. Okay, and that was the beginning of the real wealth divide going absolutely crazy, because the elites were printing fake money and buying real assets and stealing value from the people through money printing. So, but again, the people who understood what had happened did adapt.
Yes.
And Ray Dalio gives a great story. I know you've mentioned Ray Dalio before, Dan, that he, you know, he does some great talks. He's quite mainstream, but he's very clued up in cycles economically. That he was a young trader on Wall Street in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And essentially, to simplify things, you know, they inflated their own debt bubble already, even backed by gold, by having a massive trade deficit, the US. So rather than pay their debts, they just changed the rules. So we're not paying our debts, it's no longer backed by gold. But of course, it was and like most of these government measures, it was a temporary measure, of course, that never went back.
Yes.
Okay? And then he got embroiled in all the scandals and people forgot. But it literally was announced on, you know, they stopped the program, the announcement of the program. Most people had no idea what it meant. And Ray Dalio was a young trader, and he understood that meant that basically they're admitting they're bankrupt in terms of, you know, they've got such a trade deficit that they're screwed. So his understanding was, well, that's, you know, terrible news for the economy. He went into Wall Street the next morning thinking the markets will crash because, you know, they basically admitted that, you know, in serious trouble here. The markets opened and they went on a huge, you know, run up. And that taught him as a young trader that the smart money moved out of the currency because they realized it was no longer backed by anything, and they moved into assets. Okay. So therefore, those people who understood what was going on, understood what that meant, having a currency backed by nothing, moved to the currency side of the equation and did really well.
Yes.
So again, those simple sort of shifts of understanding can transform your financial moves.
Well, I think that's important, Sam. And yeah, I'll take us into the kind of wrap up of this conversation now. Dalio, I'll just underscore, you know, if you haven't heard of Ray Dalio, it's Dalio, Ray Dalio. He's got a fantastic 13-minute summary of the kind of market cycles on YouTube. Just look it up. You'll find it. If you type in his name, market cycles, it will come up. But interestingly, his view on the current situation is bleak. You know, he thinks that this is going to be worse than 2008 because there's so many new variables, as we've touched upon. So I think, you know, if I was to kind of encapsulate everything we've talked about, it's about knowledge, becoming aware, becoming empowered, and then finding the appropriate action to take, because the actions that we can take today could radically alter our own future, both individually and collectively as a society. And, you know, whether we go down the centralized path or decentralized path, we have the power to influence that future. But I know people will be listening in today or watching thinking, whoa, there's so much to learn. There's so much to get my head around. So I just want to break down 3 layers that we're going, you know, 3 ways that we are here to support. Firstly, what you're watching now, if you're with us in the Zoom room, this is our live recording of our first episode of the Uncharted Territory podcast. We've released a pilot a couple of weeks back, but we're going to be coming at you every single week on the podcast, having conversations like this. The way this one's gone, Sam, we've gone a little Rogan-esque. I think, you know, we could sit in a studio for 3 hours at a time, and each episode could be quite lengthy. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we should get together in person and record full-length conversations. But every week we'll be on the podcast. You'll be able to access this on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, all the major platforms. You'll be able to tune into this conversations just like this. The second layer is our course that we worked together on earlier last year, the digital assets course, which is really a primer into crypto. It explains the kind of foundations, the history, how to get your currency into crypto, how to get it out of crypto, gives you kind of a kind of walkthrough of how to build a kind of investment thesis, if that's what you're interested in. But even if you're not interested in crypto itself, the foundational knowledge that we've talked about today will give you that edge to actually be able to join the conversation in other contexts, and you'll just have the awareness, a deeper awareness of what's really happening. But as a result of creating that course, you know, we've had hundreds of people go through that now with really some amazing feedback. And, you know, thanks to Sam, who's really led that material, curated that conversation. We've decided to go a further step based on the requests and feedback from our members of that course. Many people ask the question, what next? How do we continue the journey? How do we deepen our knowledge? Because a lot of people are looking at this from a number of lenses. They want to protect their assets. They want to safeguard their funds, because when all this chaos is unfolding, and I know my parents are in that bucket, you know, they're seeing their pension pot hit, you know, so people are worried about their financial future based upon what's happening. And if there is a market collapse, how do we protect those assets? There's that layer. But there's also the layer of, okay, well, what are my options? You touched upon a few of them today, Sam. You know, what's the alternative? Should I be looking at gold? Should I be looking at property? Should I be looking at crypto? And if I'm going to look at crypto, that's a whole new world. Where do I even begin? Which we touch upon in the course. But how do I now start to assess the world and navigate it as it unfolds? So in response to the feedback of our members, almost by request of our members, we've decided to launch a new private community program, which we'll talk to you very briefly about. Don't worry, we're not going to go into a lengthy pitch, but we want to get people together on a monthly basis. We're going to be hosting a number of calls every single month, looking at the financial reset as it unfolds, and also bringing you what we're calling tentatively as Crypto Corner, where we're going to go into a lot more depth. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing on those calls?
Yeah, well, I think I want to come back to it's interesting. It ties into cycles again, because this has been on my mind that people need, you know, and have asked for ongoing support, because this is going to be endlessly, you know, evolving. And equally, so much of it is new to people, and that continuity. So it's also that continuity of support, a certain level of discipline to stay with the learning and the educating, and to explore with each other and learn about different areas. And it's really interesting, because I was, you know, we discussed it, Dan, even months ago, and I was thinking very much New Year. But this is again how they screw us with the cycles, because real New Year isn't the real New Year. So people are trying to make, I was very like, let's launch in January, let's get going. But the reason a lot of things come together in March, and we're here in March, is because this is the actual New Year, right? This is towards the spring equinox. You know, it's Aries, which is the head. So that's partly why, you know, again, when you get in tune, this is a great time to begin. And I'm experienced that, because I've given talks all through the winter. And what's really interesting, just recently, I've seen a real budding of energy coming up from people, much more, you know, of saying, I'm ready to take action now. And we discussed it, Dan, that quite understandably, people are burnt out from all the agendas and the info, which won't stop and are going to continue. But can we, almost being on out that journey, can we come back to ourselves and see what can we do? Come home almost and start from here, which is what we can control, which is our own actions. So I think having that space is going to be really powerful to continue the dialogue and stay in the energy. And as I know from staying in energy myself, there are all sorts of opportunities, and it's actually much more exciting rather than just fearful. And because there's no right way, and it has to resonate with you, it's about really exploring the different options. We'll look at different asset classes, the pros and cons of all of them, I think what's great is that neither me and Dan, I think people know that, we're not coming from any angle. We're here just looking at everything and looking at the options, because there is no right answer. That's the sovereign path, that there are things that will suit you and there are things that will suit me better. And depending on your goals, your desires, your needs, your current situation. And I think that's what's really powerful, is we can look holistically at the pros and cons of all different areas, what it's like to get involved. So you can, because we're really trying to, as I do for myself, we'll do for each other, pull the sovereignty decisions out of each other, not ever being that dictating of, I got into crypto because, my friend told me to, whatever. It's like I got into it because I understood why. And when you understand why and you're empowered, then you actually usually do much better, because you feel good about your decision. So there's so much to learn. And I think we turn it into something creative. So yeah, that's why this really has come, again, another organic sort of next step on the journey down, and that aspect that it's going to be ongoing. And it's that combination of, like you said, asset protection, lots of ways of, we know we've been an asset stripping agenda. The World Economic Forum have told you, as they always do, what they want to do. So how do we make it as hard as possible? Because there are lots of ways. They rely again, a lot of it on tacit consent. As I say, if you leave your assets with them, they'll take them. But there are ways of taking things to self-custody, different ways. So that's really what it's about, is looking at sovereignty and making improvements, and also not feeling under pressure, like I've got to do this, this, and this. Just making any steps towards that improvement, improving your situation, or feeling more sovereign, or feeling more in control of your assets, is going to make you feel better, and is a step towards progress, and a step towards improving. So I always think people, also the fear is that they've got to rush and get somewhere very quickly. And I always think, don't act out of fear. Yes, we need to get moving, but it's not like it's got to be all done by next week and decide. It's much better to take decisions where you feel happy and you're actually excited to take them, you're pleased you take them, and you are the barometer. I think often when you do these actions, what's right for you, and we're really giving you more info and more explanation, and being able to have to bounce all those questions off each other. And also, particularly in crypto, I know that, sadly, a lot of people get scammed, so I would say, partly the powerful thing about the course is, if you've been through that, or you've got the support of somebody you trust, and hopefully you trust my opinion more than those guys on YouTube just making all those crazy faces because they're after clickbait and revenue, is that you do it well and sovereignly and in a way that's empowering and safe. So yeah, like I said, there's huge, which is why we end up talking for hours, and you better stop me, Dan, I'll keep going. But yeah, to go on that journey together and support each other and react to what's happening, not in a fear base, but also you've got a place to go, hang on, this is happening now. What people are afraid, but getting that dialogue going is so crucial, because so many people are understandably, can feel isolated and economically isolated as well. If you're just able to have that, share your fears, or, I don't like using it because don't want a safe space as it's all put, but a place where you feel that you're with like-minded people, that we are all on that journey together. Is there somewhere you can go and explore these things? And I always say to people that are crypto, no question is too basic. You don't have to know anything. You need to start from where you're at and learn from there and get empowered and see where this journey goes, really.
Yeah, I mean, when we started the conversation around this, there's kind of three kind of key intentions. One is to help people to prepare for the unknown and understand what's happening and what could happen, helping people to break through the noise, getting through that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, so you can become kind of equipped to make proactive and informed decisions about your own future, and ultimately to get the kind of support you need to be around other people who are on the same path as you. We know from the last couple of years, it's very isolating when you begin a journey like this. This is, to me, about creating a supportive community around an emergent topic, so that you can kind of discover the kind of practical tools that you need, become empowered psychologically and emotionally to deal with what's happening, but ultimately to discover new options that could not only help you protect your assets, but rather than simply being on the defense, you can also look at new options to grow your wealth, if that's what you're interested in. And everyone's at different phases of their life. Lizzie and I are thinking about, do we expand our family? If so, what's next? And, as a result, finances have to come into that conversation. So wherever people are at on their own financial journey, whether in the kind of financial autumn, thinking about winter, the latter stages of life, or you're in metaphorical spring, you're just planting the seeds for what's coming next, or you're in summer and you're just, you're basking in the kind of glory of what you've already delivered, but you're now worried about losing that. Wherever you're at on the journey, we want to create a space, and I agree, I don't particularly like the term safe space. I like courageous space for courageous conversations to explore these very challenging subject matter, and to go full circle to where we started. I personally, when I build a program, something like this, I look for something that I personally want to be part of, because there is so much out there around crypto and Bitcoin and the financial reset, but it's all so hyperbolic. It's so intense and there's so much hype around it. I rather to come into that space, where it's a lot more grounded and
holistic, Dan, as well. Holistic angle. There was a comment, I think it was, probably maybe on this call tonight. Somebody said, should we not be prepared for the apocalyptic, aspect as well? And it's almost like, it's going to be inclusive, because in a sense that the conversation has to go to all scenarios. But we cover all those bases rather than being fixated on there, and so much of it is being able to have that outlet for those questions and explore them and see what actions we take from there. And like you said, I always seek out down on my journey, mentors or other people I want to collaborate with who come with a balanced, holistic look at it. And that's what's challenging to find if you're lost on YouTube, particularly in areas like crypto, but even in finance, because you have to realize a lot of them are, it's a business for them just to get clicks on their videos for drama. So finding balanced things that we can relate to, that come in and look at every angle towards it. That's that's how I am, and I like to look at things from every perspective.
Yes,
that's really important.
Yes, I think people will know if they want to walk this path, and whether they're actually looking to explore different options, and whether they resonate with the types of conversations we've had. So we will continue to have these weekly calls on the podcast. And for those of you who are drawn to what we've shared tonight, you can find out more about our new monthly support program, which we're launching tonight. You can go to weareelevate.org/NFR. That's NFR for Navigating the Financial Reset. We are going to buy a fancy domain, but we looked at Navigating the Financial Reset. That's a lot to type in. So for now, it's on the We Are Elevate domain at weareelevate.org/NFR. If you're with us in Zoom, you'll get the link in the chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the other platforms, it'll be in the description and the comments. If you're listening on audio, you'll have to click around a bit more. It's inside Spotify or Apple, usually behind the picture of the episodes. But it's weareelevate.org/NFR. And it's a program that we structured with a couple of calls per month, looking at these key issues, private discussion forums so people can continue the conversation, and a on-demand access library of resources that will accumulate over the time that we're together in the months and weeks ahead. So I want to thank everyone for being part of our live podcast tonight. This is the Uncharted Territory Podcast. It's our first official episode, and we're here tonight also officially launching our Navigating the Financial Reset support program for those of you who would like to be part of that. Sam, it's been a pleasure being with you this evening. For those who have joined us live, we're going to open up to Q&A now. Right. I joked about this kind of Joe Rogan episode. We said we'll talk for 30 to 40 minutes. Where are we? Look over.
It's never going to happen, Dan.
Yeah, my community know that. They prepare. I think my community now set out 3 hours and make hot drinks and get snacks. They know what to expect. But I want to thank everyone for watching. And if you're listening or watching to the replay and saying I'd love to have been part of that Q&A session, then do come and join us at Elevate, and you'll see how to do that. Sam, it's over and out from us. Are we wrapping up here for the episode?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we could go on all night, but we'll save it for next week.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, lots to unravel.